Dave Zimmerman, Chop Wood, Carry Water here. And I wanted to run through a set of low back exercises. I'm going to call them low back exercises. They're really largely centered around the hips. But for those of us in particular who have occasional or maybe even more continual low back pain, oftentimes just doing a series like this daily or a couple times a day will make all the difference. I do this almost every day. I'm not going to lie and say I do it every day, but I can tell you that the days I do it, I feel a lot better than the days I don't. Now, for me, it's real easy. I have a pretty firm bed, and I can do these first thing in the morning, even before I jump out of bed. Another way to do that might be even just getting right onto the floor. If you need you do need a pretty firm surface for this. Might just get right onto the floor and do these even before you start moving too much through your day. But they're short, it's simple. The way I've done these, now these are all things that can be done just as holding a stretch, as a static stretch as well. But you'll notice I do these as a movement because I am doing these first thing in the morning typically for me. I want to make sure that I am warming up that joint. And I really like the light core work even that I start to get out of this. I start to get my abs engaged and the movement that we're looking for. I'm going to show you. So if you think about your hip, and we're going to say this is the hip socket. Out here, the elbow, we'll say that's my knee. When we move that leg, that hip, I'm exaggerating this, but that ball is actually meant to glide in the socket. And a lot of us who have low back pain really have limited movement in that hip. And so what starts to happen when we're not getting that glide is that your pelvis and your back start moving around, and they're moving excessively to make up for that lack of glide in that joint, and that's in that hip joint, and that's part of the reason that we want to walk through these. So with that, let's get started. So it's easiest and quickest for me to run through these all on one side and then all on the other. So that's the way I'm going to do this for you. Keep in mind, this knee that's on the leg that we're not using could be up toward the ceiling. And this is going to be easiest to maintain a nice, easy position for that low back. When I extend that leg, which is the way I usually do this, we do have to work those abdominals a little bit more to keep that back in the position that we wanted, in that more natural position, rather than letting the belly pop up or letting that back arch. And so here, I'm going to start with that knee in, and I'm really working on this first one to keep a nice straight line this way, a straight plane of movement, rather than letting that knee come out here to the side. That's going to stretch that hip differently if I can get that knee and the shin to move in a nice straight plane of movement here. I'm extending out, and when I come in, I'm giving that a little help, a little glide in that hip. I can feel that a little bit. If you can't feel it, just fake it. Just pretend for a little while. Eventually that'll start to come. That'll start to move. And when I reach outward, I'm having to use those abs to keep that belly flat. I'm going to do one more of those. I usually do about 8 or 12 of these. Kind of depends on how stiff I am. Next one, piriformis stretch. This could be so now I am changing that plane of movement. Now I'm rotating. And I'm either bringing that thigh and that shin across toward my opposite shoulder. Some days that one feels better for me. Or we can do this more as what we would call a figure 4 stretch, where I bring that other leg up and then I'm moving in and out of that figure 4 stretch. But I want to keep those hips nice and even here, not squirming around on the floor or the mat or the bed or wherever you're doing these. And 3, this one's feeling pretty good for me today, so I'm going to stick with this figure 4. Last one. And then I'm going to go right into a hamstring movement, I'm going to call it, because again, it's not a static stretch. I'm moving into putting those hamstrings on length and then bending that knee, and then lengthening those hamstrings and bending that knee. And I'll do that 3 more times here. So I keep checking in with my shoulders. This is a great opportunity to check in with those shoulders. Make sure you're not tensing up or hiking those blades toward your ears. I'm getting those upper back muscles engaged. I think I did 1 extra there, but we're going to hold it up there. And now I'm doing ankle circles. So still getting a hamstring stretch, but now I'm also really getting some activity, some stretch, some lengthening in that calf. Getting the ankle joint moving, getting even the bones in the feet, the bones, those heel bones moving. 2 and 1. And then I'm going to bring that leg down, keeping that belly flat. Oh boy, now it feels like this leg is about 2 inches longer than the other one. And I'm going to bring that knee in, and I'm going to extend that leg out. Knee in, extend that leg out. And again, I'm thinking about that nice straight plane of movement. 2, last 1, and then that piriformis stretch again, that can be coming across toward that opposite shoulder, or that can be that more of that figure 4 style stretch. And those hips even as I do that. Can even facilitate a little bit of that rotation with helping out with the hand. 1 more time. And then going into that hamstring lengthener here. Last one. And then ankle circles. Reversing the direction. Now, before I get to the next one, because I am going to transition right to it, this is one that you want to be cautious about. You don't want you to have any low back pain. Some of you have scoliosis or other orthopedic issues where you may not want to be hyperextending your spine. However, and you'll probably know if you give this a little try, if it feels really good to do, then you're probably a good candidate. If you feel real tense and tight across your low back when you do this, then you do not want to do this one. But this is one that usually feels pretty good for me to do. My hands are at my sides, and this is a little different than our swan in Pilates. Some of you have done that, and we want to be real active with our spine and torso with that. This is a little more passive. I'm actually really pushing with my arms, and I'm actually kind of relaxing things in my torso so that I can start to facilitate some movement in that spine. You could imagine, if you think about your discs, if you have a herniation or something, imagine the herniation being sort of pushed back into that center of the spine. We're looking for some elasticity here. And that movement in the spine and in the hips as well. And another thing that this can really help with is facilitating movement at that, some extension at that SI joint. I know for me, that sacroiliac joint sometimes gets sort of stuck. And when I get this movement happening, sometimes I can feel that I can start to get that SI joint unstuck here. 1 more time. Now, that's the routine that I will do in the morning. Now, a lot of us who have back issues, and I would say myself included, really have almost a chronically tight hip flexors. So this is one I don't recommend doing it in the bed, for example. But just throwing in a hip flexor stretch, I think, is really helpful. And I'm going to try and give you a couple cues about this that I think are very helpful, because when we get into this basic hip flexor stretch position, Keep in mind this is a very asymmetrical position for the legs and the hips. Those of you with some hip stability issues, and again with scoliosis, you may want to be really cautious with this, or just even skip this and find a better way, another way to stretch those hip flexors or lengthen those hip flexors. But the real key to this, because I can move back and forth all day with my hips, and I'm not getting much of a hip flexor stretch out of this, and that's because I'm moving my back. If I really get those abs engaged and really start to create some length, now I haven't even moved forward very far, and now I'm really feeling a stretch here across the front of that hip. So I'm going to really focus much less on a big movement here and much more on really getting long. You might even add those arms to reach to help with that, but we want that to really be a whole body lifting and lengthening. And again, just like with the other stretches, I'm going to do this as a movement where I'm moving in and out of it, so I can continue to facilitate getting that hip joint warmed up, getting my body warmed up rather than holding the static stretch. However, static stretch is an option, especially if you're already warmed up. One more time. And then I'm going to do that on the other side. And the last one. Try those every day. Try those twice a day if you need to, and see if that doesn't really improve your situation. Sometimes it's just that maintenance, that management of our orthopedic situations that really make all the difference. And for me, with my low back, I find that's true. I think at this age and with some of the incidents that I've had in my past that sometimes come back to haunt me, I think the idea of never having my low back be stiff is very unrealistic. But having these things that I can do, again, it can feel like a night and day difference when I'm doing these regularly. And if I do start to feel tight, feel stiff, I simply run through these real quickly and I'm back in action. So hopefully you find that as well. Thanks.